This is Avdhesh Kumar Singh, School of Translation Studies and Training, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Delhi. Today, I shall be dealing with comparative literature and introduction. The term comparative literature came into existence as a reaction against what we know today as national literature. All of us are aware of the fact that by the second half of the 18th century in Europe, the feudal order was in a state of erosion, and this feudal society was being replaced gradually by a new entity or a new category called nation. This nation was a very limited concept because it meant one region, one religion, one race, one language, one literature and one culture. In other words, for England, it used to be England as a geographical territory, Anglo-Saxon race, Christianity as religion, English language, English literature and English culture. And national literature, because of these limitations, became a source of compartmentalization of societies, and therefore, the great minds of Europe reacted against it, and one of such persons was Goethe or Goethe from Germany. And two categories were put forward. One was comparative literature, another was world literature. National literature was literature of a nation in one language, and there was implicit notion of superiority of that literature over others. Europe was changing in the sense that other countries, other societies, their cultures and their literatures were available to Europe through translations, and in the process what we see is that Goethe was receiving Sanskrit literature through translations of Abhigyan Shakuntalam, Shahnama from Persian, through his students Johann Ackermann amongst others. He was reading literatures from China, Serbia and so on, and therefore, he was of firm belief that very soon national literature would be replaced by world literature. For the sake of historical detail, let me state that the term world literature or Weltliteratur, as we know in German, was noted by Johann Ackermann, the student and friend of Goethe, on 31st January 1827. We would see that both these terms, comparative literature and world literature, were being used synonymously, but in the practice what happened was that world literature became a collection of masterpieces, literary masterpieces from different cultures, from different literatures. Comparative literature became a methodology, because how to study world literature? Comparative literature provided methodology, and this methodology one might see today in terms of comparative study of themes, which is called as thematology, comparative study of literary forms, which is known as genealogy, comparative study of influence, which later on came to be replaced by reception, and subsequently comparative study of studying different literary traditions by putting them together. Along with that, this methodology included translation, their comparative studies, the comparative study of literary movements, historiography, critical traditions and poetics, what we know as comparative poetics. Therein we will see that this methodology was the result of practice of comparative study of literature, and in Europe different countries focused on one particular aspect more than the other aspect. In fact, in all countries, different ways of comparing similarities, dissimilarities and resemblances were practiced, but different schools came in existence. For instance, the French scholars of comparative literature focused on study of influence. Now, this influence primarily was based on an assumption that literary work is written by a writer who is influenced by different forces, economic, social, cultural, and the ideas around the person. And these ideas, these influences influence the psyche or the mind of the creative writer, and then they are articulated in literary works. We can very easily see the influence of positivistic philosophy on this influence studies, and the result was that the influence came to be known as mechanical category. Mechanical, by that is meant is that the people who worked in this area, they collected details about what the author read, with whom the author interacted, and then the way they shaped the author's writings. Since influence has influencer and influencee, one who influences and one who gets influenced, and in that we find that influencer becomes more important than the person who is influenced. Therefore, it was later on replaced by reception, and reception includes the basic assumption that the receiver is more important, because everything is in the air, but the way they are received depends on the receiver. All of us know that this came to be questioned particularly by the American school of comparative literature in the 5th decade. Later on we find that Rene Wellek focused on it and spoke about crisis of comparative literature in 1958-59. Second school was German school of comparative literature, and German school of comparative literature focused on comparative study of themes, which is known as thematology. And the British school, as we know, did not on its own put forward the fact that this was in school, but they maybe their efforts may be summed up by a term that we know, placing. What is meant by placing is that when two literary works or two literary traditions are placed together, then they throw light on each other. That is, one understands one literature or one literary work in the light of other literary work. So, placing helps better understanding of both the works. The fact then is that this placing leads to mutual elimination of literary works, and what we find is that these three schools led the formation of other schools or practices of comparative literature all over the world, and different chairs of comparative literary studies were established all over the world, in New Zealand, in Europe, in America, and countries elsewhere. Major breakthrough may be witnessed around 1955, when H H Remark made comparative literature interdisciplinary, because he said that comparative literature includes study of not just literatures, but other domains of knowledge, and these domains included architecture, social sciences, sciences, and so on. And this gave a new dimension and a new direction to the methodology of comparative literature that was subsequently followed by the reports of American Association of Comparative Literature and comparative literature from 1960 onwards is the period of spree of activities in this domain that we may discuss subsequently in different session. Thank you.